Hi, today I'm going to tell you a terrifying and heartbreaking true story of a very dear friend of mine, Wang, who was recently affected by the deadly virus in China. I will narrate this story in her husband Chang's words. I want you to turn off the lights, get in a comfortable position, and on the count of three, close your eyes. 1, 2, 3. On January 7, my wife went to a wet market to buy a fish head, chicken and some vegetables to make hot pot.
Yummy food.
We all had dinner together and her appetite was good. She ate plenty. The next day was our daughter's last day of school before the Lunar New Year holiday. My wife said she wasn't feeling well and asked me to pick our daughter up. On the 9th, the two of them spent all day at home. Around noon, my wife messaged me and said she had a cold.
Achoo. Achoo.
She asked me to pick up some cold medications on my way home from work, as well as a pregnancy test. I got off work a little after 5 p.m. and came home with the medicine and the test. A few hours later, at around 6 or 7 o'clock, she told me she was pregnant. I was happy. I made dinner that night, fried pork liver, pickled vegetables, and some greens. She had a big bowl of rice, but seemed a little off.
Achoo.
Afterwards, I went to wash the dishes. And she returned to our room to sleep. I figured she had a cold and just needed some rest, and I soon followed her to bed. But at about 3 a.m., she suddenly shook me awake and told me she didn't feel well. Her head and throat hurt. She had a fever of 38 degrees Celsius. I quickly took her to Huanggang Hospital. There was no one to watch our daughter, so we took her with us rather than leave her at home alone. The doctors told us they couldn't give my wife an IV drip until the morning, so all we could do was pick up some cold medicine. On the way home, it started to rain. And by the time we got back, it was around 4 a.m. My wife was coughing non-stop, and neither of us could sleep. Only my daughter got any rest.
Sleeping time.
It rained the whole day on January 10. We got up at around 7 a.m. and went back to the hospital. The doctors ran some tests and told us her throat was inflamed. But they couldn't give her any medicine or injections because she was pregnant. It was already noon by the time they finished, so we decided to go home first, then head to the hospital in the afternoon. I made my wife some porridge for lunch, but she could only manage a few bites. That afternoon, we went to the Huanggang Women's Hospital. The doctors there said the same thing. She was pregnant and couldn't take medicine or receive shots. So we went back to the TCM hospital, this time to the respiratory clinic. By that point, my wife was having trouble breathing. She was weak and could barely walk. She was also experiencing chills. The doctors gave her electrocardiogram before telling us to go to the municipal hospital downtown. When we couldn't get to see a doctor there, we went to the smaller hospital instead. It was already late afternoon, and we'd been carrying our daughter around with us all day.
Papa, let's go home.
I called my brother-in-law and asked him to come by and take the girl to the grandfather's house. I then sat on a stool and asked my wife how she felt about being admitted, rather than leaving and coming back the next day. She couldn't speak, but she kept nodding her head. It was painful to watch. That was a long day. At 11 p.m., my wife was transferred to a top hospital in Wuhan. I'd heard a few days earlier that there had been a pneumonia breakout in that city, but there had been no cases reported in Huanggang, so I hadn't given it much thought. The doctors also didn't say anything about it. My only concern was figuring out how to pay to keep my wife alive and how to get her into the best hospital possible. After she was admitted to the hospital in Wuhan, the doctors there told me my wife had a germ infection. They said her lung scan came back completely white. In Wuhan, my wife was first admitted into the fever clinic. At around 1 or 2 in the morning, on January 11, she was transferred to the ER and then moved into an observation ward for those in critical condition. From the moment my wife went to the fever clinic, she was kept in isolation. The doctors told me she had an unknown type of pneumonia. The next day, they said her condition was critical and they would need to revise her treatment plan. She needed some kind of machine, they said. All I knew was that it would be expensive, 20,000 yuan a day, and even then, there was only 10% chance she'd survive. I was on the verge of a breakdown. I hadn't had any rest in days. Finally, on the morning of January 12, I found a chair in the hospital and went to sleep for an hour. I wasn't allowed to see my wife. I wanted to see her. I wanted to talk to her and ask her how she was doing, what she wanted to eat, or if there was anything she wanted to do. But I couldn't. Every time I called her doctors, they told me she still hadn't woken up. Her doctor said her hands turned purple, then her feet. It all happened so fast. After she was put into an observation ward on January 11, I wouldn't see her again until I picked up her ashes 11 days later. By noon on January 21st, I had exhausted every available resource, and my wife was showing no sign of improvement. Utterly heartbroken, I talked it over with my in-laws before signing an agreement to halt further treatment. An hour later, at 1:46 p.m., my wife died. Her death certificate says she died of septic shock, respiratory failure, and severe pneumonia. The day after my wife died, I went to the hospital to fill out paperwork, then to the sanatorium to pick up her ashes. There were 10 or so people there. Afterward, I took the bus back to my home village. I haven't been back to Huanggang since. I can't sleep. I lie awake in bed. I can't put this pain into words. It's still the Lunar New Year holiday, but my home feels cold and cheerless. My neighbors are terrified, and almost everybody hides in their houses. My daughter is too young to understand what happened. Sometimes she asks me where her mother went, and I don't know what to tell her.
Mama, where are you?